In the far north of Europe, against a backdrop of fjords, forests and modern skylines, Norwegians are preparing to vote. It's an election that was once expected to unseat the current government, but something's changed. A quiet shift unfolding not just in polling data, but in the public mood. Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre, leader of Norway's centre-left Labour Party, had until recently been written off by pundits and opponents alike. Yet today he's found renewed strength as crises abroad and pressures at home reshape the political conversation. And unexpectedly, it's international turbulence, much of it with roots far from Norwegian soil, that may be tipping the scales. Political scientist Jonas Berg from Oslo's Institute for Social Research has tracked voter sentiment for years. According to him, this election cycle is different. Inflation, global conflict, and leadership perception are intersecting in ways Norway hasn't seen in decades. The economy remains a central issue. Norway is not immune to the inflation gripping much of the developed world. Right-leaning parties are advocating tax cuts and smaller government. The left, by contrast, is emphasising social equity and stronger safety nets. It's a familiar battle, but what makes this race unique is the changing global climate. Berg notes that the return of Donald Trump to the American political stage, ongoing war in Ukraine, and a more volatile international trade environment have all sparked a kind of reflex among Norwegian voters, a gravitation towards stability. Støre, once criticised for being too much of a diplomat and not enough of a populist, is now benefiting from that very image. Before becoming Prime Minister, Støre was Norway's foreign minister. He helped steer Norwegian diplomacy through global recessions, Russian aggression and climate negotiations. Now, his seasoned presence is being seen not as detached, but dependable. Across party lines, Norwegians are re-evaluating what kind of leader they want. And while the left hasn't surged dramatically in support, it has held its ground, something few expected just months ago. Norway's multi-party system, consisting of 9 significant political entities, makes elections here a game of inches. A shift of just 2 or 3 seats can completely realign parliamentary control. The centre-right coalition remains formidable, but recent polls show Labour narrowly ahead. And it's not just the economy that's driving voters to reconsider. Security and foreign policy, long relegated to the sidelines in Norwegian elections, have stepped into the spotlight. For the first time since the Cold War, surveys show Norwegians ranking foreign policy among their top concerns. The war in Ukraine has heightened this awareness. Norway, a NATO member, has pledged military and humanitarian support. While this hasn't become a fiercely polarising issue here, it has reinforced the idea that global instability demands experienced leadership. Interestingly, even Norway's right-wing Progress Party, typically known for its nationalist leanings, has shown moderation compared to counterparts across Europe. Unlike Germany's AfD or Sweden's Sweden Democrats, the Progress Party maintains firm backing for Ukraine and avoids extreme rhetoric. This does not mean their platform is without controversy. Immigration, cultural identity and taxation remain hot-button issues, but the tone is notably more restrained. In this political landscape, radical language has given way to a quieter, more strategic push for influence. For many voters, the question isn't ideology, it's trust. Who can they trust to manage global shocks, to navigate Norway's economy through stormy waters, and to represent the country with competence abroad? Støre's critics have long labelled him aloof, but that same calm, measured style now appears more presidential than distant. As international uncertainties swirl, his experience is being reappraised, and for a growing number of Norwegians, it's enough to keep him in office. Voices from across the country express varying hopes. Some want lower taxes, others demand climate leadership, and many just want stability. But the common thread, a desire for steady hands at the helm. In a world defined by chaos, Norway's left-wing government may endure, not because of what it promises, but because of what it has already weathered. Sometimes the safest vote is for the steady course.
So I think the major issues have to do with the economy. So we've had inflation in Norway, like in most countries, and so people's sort of cost of living is a major issue. So the parties on the right are talking especially about taxes and lowering taxation in Norway, whereas the parties on the left are talking about social inequalities, those types of things. But the economy, I think, is top of mind. We have 9 parties altogether, so it's quite a few political parties. But if you combine the center left and the center right, it's quite close. But the most recent polls show a slight lead for the center left. So the ruling Labour Party with the Prime Minister Støre is doing somewhat better than the opposition center right parties. I think one of the reasons why Labour is doing quite well is because of the international situation is sort of uncertain, and Støre has a long history. He's been foreign minister of Norway. His strongest asset, in a way, is handling of international affairs, and that used to be a problem for him because he wasn't seen as much of as a man of the people, so to speak. But now that is an asset or an advantage for him. And so the fact that Donald Trump was elected president in the United States, there's talk about tariffs, and international trade is much more uncertain. There's a war in Ukraine. All of those international issues make voters sort of rally around the sitting government and is in effect an advantage for the Labour Party. Norwegian voters are mostly, in most parliamentary elections, domestic issues tend to dominate. But in this election, we've seen international issues come more to the forefront, and there have been surveys showing that voters are more concerned about, security policy, international policy, than they usually are. It's unclear to me how important it will be in the end, because a lot of those domestic issues, the economy, like I mentioned, tend to become the most important issues in the end when voters actually go to the polls. But in any case, in security policy, international policy is more important in this election than it has been probably since the Cold War. So the Progress Party, it's fair to say it's a populist right-wing political party, but it is considered much more moderate than some of the other populist right-wing parties in Europe, like the AFD in Germany or the Sweden Democrats in Sweden. So the Progress Party in Norway is much more part of the political establishment than other parties in the same category in other European countries. So they are, for instance, very critical of immigration, but their rhetoric is not as extreme as some of those other parties. The Progress Party in Norway has also been very supportive of Ukraine and of Norway's support for Ukraine in the war.